The other issue related to the practice of medicine and even biomedical research is what is called death and dying. Now, talking about death and dying, we need to define death. What is death? Is it a process that has several steps to go through before declaring death, or it is an event, starts and stops immediately? And the definition of death also concerns the death of the person as a whole or death of the organism. If we consider the human being as an organism, so the definition of death is either is it a definition of the death of the person, a whole person, or the organism? Now, traditionally, in clinical practice today, death is defined as the permanent cessation of function of heart and lung, permanent, and then after a few minutes, what will happen? Irreversible brain damage. And once a reversible brain damage occur, we declare the patient is dead. What is new in the medical practice that appeared to go back and define the death again? It is the advent of artificial respiration. With the advent of this artificial respiration, one of two outcomes might occur. Depending on what? Depending on the status of the brain. Now, the first condition is that if the brain is uninjured, brain is intact, artificial function would permit patients recovery to normal status. And so many people went through this process, falling down from height, went unconscious, brain was not injured, put a respirator, some put a respirator for months. A person who has been put on respirator for 6 months, and that person he recovered normally. ومشكلته هذا الشخص حتى لما تقابله he will not stop talk all the time, even talking to himself. This is the abnormality that happened to that person. Otherwise, he's completely healthy because his brain was not injured, put an artificial respiration for 6 months, and regained consciousness. After that, he went to be a normal person. Or if the patient remains on artificial respiration while the brain is partially or totally injured. This condition led to rethinking of the criteria of death. When to declare this patient dead? The first one, you cannot declare it. The second one, you can declare it. Now, the other factor that come out of the practice of medicine and led us to rethink again of the criteria of death, which is the process of organ transplant. Now organ transplant become a common practice, or common medical practice, and we take organs from the dead donor. So in order to take this organ from a dead donor, we need to declare this person is dead before taking his organs. Now, if we await for the cessation of heart and lungs to stop, then we will damage all the other organs of the body, and the donor and becomes no more a donor for any organ in the body because they are all damaged. Therefore, it is added another criteria of death, which is complete and irreversible loss of all brain functions. Complete, irreversible of all brain functions to declare brain death. Now, if we declare brain death, then we consider that the patient is dead, and in this condition, we put him on artificial respiration so as not to spoil the other organs of the body, and we can take whatever organs from that dead donor to transplant it in another patient. Sorry. This new criteria of death allows patients with irreversible loss of brain function to be declared dead, even if respiration and circulation are being artificially maintained. Now, it seems simple, but the other question that arises after that is what procedures need to be taken or tests need to be taken by which to establish that the brain is dead, given the fact that medical knowledge and medical technology change over time. So this is, if we answer this question, then we solve a big problem in the area of artificial respiration and organ transplantation. Brain death, which means whole brain death, means loss of two functions. To declare that the brain is dead means it loses the two main functions of the brain, which is the lower brain functions. What are the lower? The lower means the integrating and coordinating functions, natural respiration and circulation, and you know these centers are present in the lower part of the midbrain. So if they are intact, the midbrain is intact. This means that the integrating and coordinating functions are maintained. And the second function, which is the upper or the higher brain functions, which are the functions of consciousness, thoughts, feelings, which are mainly present in the frontal lobe. So to declare the brain dead means to lose those two functions. In some cases, the respiration and heartbeats are spared while losing the higher brain function. This is what is called the persistent vegetative state, that the person becomes like a plant. It grows and eats, but he loses the higher brain functions related to consciousness, thoughts, and feelings. Now, the other question that arises then, who is to be declared dead? The person, given the fact that there is loss of higher brain function, or the human being, or the organism, which is whole brain dead. Is it the organism? Organism means that he loses the higher brain function while maintaining the lower brain functions and become permanent vegetative state. This is what's called organism, or the whole person. The person is losing the higher brain function. The higher brain function is related to the person. By losing these higher brain functions, he is no more a person. So he is just a plant. Now, to lose the upper and lower brain functions means that he becomes dead even as an organism. Now, who is to be considered declared dead? Is it the person, or the one who loses the higher brain function, or the organism who loses both the upper and lower brain functions? Now, the legal and public policy settled for the whole brain concept to be declared dead. Now, currently, we declare dead for those who lose the upper and lower brain functions, which means that to be declared dead means that the death of the organism, not the person. Then, from that, we need to look into the frame of the life support decisions, which is the artificial respiration. What is the ethical frame for life support decisions? Before the advent of artificial respiration, there is no such issue related to life support decision. Now, there is, with the advent of this procedure, we need to look into the ethical aspects of that procedure. The new concept of the main goal of healthcare decision making is to take into account again the patient well-being and patient self-determination. In each and every act in medical practice, we need to consider these two criteria for the person, which is the patient's well-being and the patient's self-determination. Does have a role in the life support decisions. Now, the life support decision is like any other decision in medical practice, like decision of treatment, decision of diagnosis, decision of admission or not admission. Again, there is a decision of life support. Now, the new concept or the main goal in the healthcare decision making is to take into account, including the decision of life support, which are the patient well-being, the patient self-determination. These two values promote the shared decision-making process in the provision of care. We discussed this before, and we came up to the conclusion that the decision-making process in medical practice need to be shared between the patient and the physician in order to promote the above two values. Traditionally, in the medical practice, the concept is to preserve health and life by treating the disease. This is what we do in medical practice. We focus on the disease, we treat the disease, and we consider ourselves by treating the disease or combating the disease, means that we preserve health and life. This is very objective, right? Preserve health and life is thought to be an objective matter and not dependent on patients' preferences and values. By focusing on the traditional practice of medicine, which revolve around the concept of preserving health and life by focusing only on the disease at hand, and by treating the disease, we regain back the patient to life and health, which is totally objective. Tell the patient now you are okay objectively, but we did not consider the patient preferences and values. If we need to promote the patient well-being, which means that we need not to deny the physician, but at the same time, we need to stress that health and life is of value insofar as they facilitate patient pursuit of his plan in life. Thanks for the doctor by treating objectively the disease and by saying that the patient, well, I'm preserving health and life, but still we need to consider, if we look into the patient's well-being, we need to consider the patient's perspective and how he looks to health and life. Is it of value or not? And is it of value or not depending on what? Depending on how much it facilitates the patient's pursuit of his plan in life. If it goes with the patient values in promoting or in planning his life, this means that the physician and the patient are in agreement. But if the patient looks into preserving health and life that he is not capable of planning for his pursuit in life, means that the physician is looking objectively to the aspect, while the patient is looking subjectively to the aspect as unimportant. We did the operation, and it was successful, but the patient is still bedridden. If he is bedridden now, he will evaluate his life. Is he able, with this situation, to plan for the pursuit of his life or not? If he cannot plan for the pursuit of this, given this condition, in spite of the fact that he was objectively treated, successfully operated upon, but still he cannot plan for his life, which means that the patient's well-being is still not promoted from the physician perspective, but not promoted from the patient's perspective. Sometimes the selection of alternative treatment that best promote well-being cannot be objectively determined independent on independent of the patient's own preferences and values. بعض الأحيان we select a treatment even from the physician perspective this is the best treatment, but still we cannot tell that this alternative treatment is objectively sound before considering what the patient's own preferences and values are. So we need to compare the alternative treatment with the preferences and values of the patient to see if it is agreeable or not agreeable to the patient or to the well-being of the patient. In case of life support decision, which is another decision in medical practice, it is a serious consideration. Why? Because the patient is critically ill and likely to die. Now we are dealing with a patient, not any patient. This patient is critically ill. This is why we need to resort to life support or intubation, and he is likely to die. And second is the quality of patient life is seriously limited by the effect of disease, by the effect of disability, or by the effect of the treatment itself. So in the case of the life support decision, which is a very serious decision. Why? Because we are dealing with a patient who is not a normal patient, rather than he is a critically ill patient and he is most likely to die. And the second, that the quality of patient's life at this state is seriously limited by the disease or by the disability. This is why we need this life support decision, because he is not a normal patient. He needs this life support decision in order to maintain the respiration, to maintain the heartbeat, in order to keep him alive. Whether it is better to continue life under such conditions or not depends significantly on the patient's views of his life under such conditions. Now, is it better to continue his life by using the life support decision? For the physician, yes, we are maintaining life on the life support decision, but it also depends on the patient's views of his life. Is it acceptable for the patient, this kind of life under such conditions, or not acceptable? So we need to consider the decision of both the patient and the physician. Physician maintaining health by promoting or by the intubation, I maintain life, while the patient looks into his condition as this life under such conditions might be worthy or worthless. The physician is the best to predict the outcome of alternative treatment. This is why he is the expert, and he can tell what are the outcomes of any treatment or any alternative treatment. Now, for the patient, he is the best to evaluate the importance that should be given to any particular effect. Okay, this is the outcome, this alternative treatment, you will be left so and so and so and so. Now the patient has to look into the importance of this outcome or this effect compared to his life. Is it worthy or not worthy? Is it important or not important? Intubation, for example, dialysis are tolerated by some while untolerated by the others. This is another preference. For the same patient, from the physician perspective, they treat each and every patient the same. Needs intubation, needs dialysis, that's okay. But what about the patient? When look to the patient, some can tolerate these procedures, others cannot tolerate these procedures. And this is why shared decision making is the best to identify the best alternative. Accordingly, one finds a prolonged life is worth it, while others see the opposite. Again, differences in patient's perspective. Some say, okay, that's an alternative treatment that I like it, as long as I'm breathing normally, I'm resting in bed. But others cannot tolerate this. I don't like this kind of treatment of life. I don't. I otherwise, so I need not to be intubated. So there are differences. الكلام اللي نحكيه هون انه في فروقات بين الناس. ناس بقول لك الحمد لله عشمت الهواء وخلص بكفي هيك، وناس بقول لك لا مش عاجبتني هاي الحياة بعد هيك. إذا صار هيك، في ناس تعجبهم الحياة هاي وفي ناس ما بتعجبهم الحياة، وبالتالي لا ما تعملهاش أو تعملها حسب الشخص نفسه شو بقدر. وعشان هيك تقدير الشخص the importance of the effect of the alternative treatment from the patient's from the physician suggestion differs by people. Now, what about self-determination? Now, if self-determination is important in ordinary health provision, and we stress the fact that self-determination of the patient is very important for his decision, if self-determination is important in any condition in medical practice, it is very important, very or much more important about life support decision that determine when and what under what conditions their lives will end. Now, self-determination means what the patients want is determined to decide for himself. If it is important decision for himself in ordinary medical conditions, it is much more important when it comes to life support decision, and he is the one to decide when and under what conditions their lives will end. Now, what about the incompetent patient? Talk about competent patient. We need to grant patient's well-being and patient self-determination granted as long as the patient is competent. If we are faced with an incompetent patient, the decision of competent patient should be respected, even decisions transferring this right to physician, which is in the paternal model. This is his assent of his decision to the physician. He's transferring his decision to the physician. So the competent patient, whatever decision he takes, should be granted, even the decision of transferring his willingness to the physician. Now, disease tend to compromise patients' ability to participate in decision making. It is not denied that the effect of the disease on the human can compromise the patient's ability to participate in decision making. For incompetent patients, if the patient becomes incompetent, the above two values, which is the well-being and self-determination, could be preserved only by advance directive, which became legally binding. Advance directive means to write what he wants when he is still competent. When he is still competent, if he writes any directive, which means an advance before his condition is compromised by patient's ability to participate in decision making, before his condition is compromised, then he can write down an advance directive telling the physician, if I got incompetent, this is my will, which is the advance directive, and became legally binding to the physician. If he violates it, This means the court is there. Advance directives could be instructional directives, which state the patient wishes or living will. This is what I wish. I write it when I am competent. So it is instructional directive, or a proxy directive, which name a surrogate to decide for him. Another advanced directive could be, which is called proxy directive, means that the patient, when he is competent, that if I became incompetent, this person, my wife, my father, whoever, my brother, will be the surrogate to decide for me when I am incompetent. And again, it is legally binding for a certain extent, because we need to discuss this further. The advance directive, however, it is not without limitations. What are the limitations of the advance directive? The limitations: only small proportion of incompetent patients had advance directive beforehand. When he got incompetent, we looked back to see if there is an advance directive from this patient or not. We find only small proportion of those patients had advance directive beforehand. The other limitation is that the advance directive has to be issued well in advance of the circumstances in which they are to be applied. Why? To ensure that the patient is competent. So the advance directive has to be written long before he gets incompetent, or long before the circumstances of the disease state might compromise his competency level, so as to ensure that the patient was competent at that time when he wrote, or when he instructed the advance directive, or when he assigned a person to be a surrogate to decide on his behalf. Thus, they tend to be vague and in a broad term. We can consider if this will, or the advance directive is written maybe 6 months before his ability to is compromised. نطلع عليها بنشوفها حتى الويل اللي كاتبها very vague ومكتوبة in broad terms, not in specific terms. Like what? If I am terminally ill, this is what he is writing, and death is imminent, إذا أنا في آخر أيام مرضي والموت اقترب, no further artificial or extraordinary means to prolong my life is to be employed. إذا كنت في آخر أيام مرضي والموت أصبح قريب, لا أرغب في الحصول على أي artificial or extraordinary means to prolong my life. هذه وصيته. Now, what does it mean terminally ill? Still vague, a broad term. Death is imminent. Who can tell when death is imminent or not? Again, it's just a suggestion. You know, medicine is the science of probability. You might die now, you might die after a few months. Are you terminally ill? What is the definition of terminally ill? So these are very vague and broad terms. This is another limitation of the advance directive. The third limitation is that there is a fear of advance directive to be intentionally misused or unintentionally abused. And here we talk about the proxy directive, which means that the patient assign a surrogate, father or brother or son or whoever, to decide for him. Sometimes if he assigned this person to decide for him, sometimes we are afraid that this advance directive be intentionally misused or unintentionally abused. Well, this is very common. Again, you can see it every now and then. Now, إذا كان الأب مريض ووكل ابنه يقوم عنه ويتخذ القرار، بعض الأحيان يمكن الولد حاب يستعجل موت أبوه، وبالتالي ويقرر إنه لا بلاش تعملوا له intubation، بلاش تحطوه على respirator، بلاش تحطوه على respirator، سواء intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes it is there is a conflict of interest here. So وبالتالي there is the fear of the advance directive from that proxy person or the person deciding for this patient. Is he deciding for the benefit of the patient or deciding for his own benefit? What about in absence of advance direction? Then somebody has to decide for him. In absence of advance directive, whether assigning a person to decide for him or instructional written directives. In absence of these, then there should be a person to decide for him. Are we going to put him on respirator or not? Then we need somebody which is called the surrogate. The principle that guides the decision making while taking into account the patient's two values mentioned above is the substituted judgment. What guides us in the decision making to intubate the patient or not intubate the patient or respirator or not, we need to consider the above two values: the patient's well-being, the patient's self-determination, and the substituted judgment. Substituted means somebody has to decide for him or to judge what is the best for the patient that promote these two values. This is the principle that guide the decision-making process. So the decision-making process given by the surrogate or given by the person who decides for the patient in the decision-making process is guided by the two values of the patient. The surrogate presumably knows the patient's preferences in such situation and decide accordingly, even if this decision is in conflict with other decisions. عادة نفترض أن يكون السرغت هذا أو اللي بنوب عنه أو اللي بيقرر عنه بيعرف المريض وبيعرف رغبات المريض. We assume إنه بيعرف البريفرنسز بتاعت المريض، وبالتالي هو قراره نابع من إنه من مدى معرفته لرغبات هذا المريض. In absence of information on patient's preferences, then the patient's interest would be the principle that guides the decision. حتى بغياب شو برغب المريض أو ما برغبش، حتى لو السرغت قال والله أنا ما بعرفش شو رغبات هذا المريض، إذن القرارات تون أو المبدأ اللي بيحكم اتخاذ هذا القرار اللي هو intubation or not intubation هو what is best interest for the patient, which is a judgment. The surrogate is usually a family member. Why a family member? Because we assume again that the family member would be the person most accepted by the patient, he knows and cares for the patient the most, and what would he wanted, and we assume that the family is a socially recognized authority of care for its independent member. وبالتالي ما دام داخل العيلة والقرار جاي من داخل العيلة معناته هي العيلة دائما هي اللي بتقرر حتى في الأمور الدنيوية الأخرى وتندرج على القرارات الطبية. But this is not always the case. وهذه fact. Why? Because the family member may have interest that is in conflict with the patient interest. قديش في ناس الأب بيتخذ قرار، الأولاد قرار مش عاجبهم وروحوا بيعملوا عليه حجر صحي. يروحوا بيدعوا إنه هذا مختل عقليا، وبالتالي بحاجة لواحد يقيم قدراته العقلية. Why? Because his interest is in conflict with their interest. And this applies also extends when to intubate or not to intubate. إذا العيلة مستعجلين وإذا الأب ماسك على هالثروة اللي عنده كلياتها وحارم الأولاد لغاية ما يموت، وما عندهوش ادفانس دايركتيف ووقع بحالة بيحتاج فيها انتوبيشن، بعتقد إنه هون صار في interest of the patient و interest of the family member، وأنه بتطغى على الفاميلي ممبرز قرارات مصلحتهم ولا مصلحة مريضهم هي اللي بتقرر، وبالتالي بعض الأحيان ممكن يكون القرار ضد مصلحة المريض تماما ومع مصلحة اللي بده يقرر عنه. In this case, the physician directly responsible. Now, where are you as a physician from this decision that appears to be in conflict between the patient interest and the surrogate interest? Where are you? Now, in this case, the physician directly responsible for the patient is obliged for the welfare of the patient, even by appealing the court. Now, you are the observer. If the decision by the surrogate appears to you that is in conflict with the patient interest, you cannot stand and you cannot grant it. It is not legally binding. Remember, we said that it is legally binding by the surrogate. No, it is not legally binding. Here, you are obliged for the welfare of the patient to interfere in the surrogate decision, even if it reached to the court. Even if it reached to the court. If the family member insisted on that procedure, you see it is against the welfare of the patient, then you can sue them. You can sue them that their decision was wrong, or you can avoid doing what they want. Even if they sue you to the court, you can appeal to the court and see that it is against the welfare, to ensure that you are talking for the welfare of the patient. Now, there are certain controversies that arise from the surrogate decision. Certain controversies arise from the surrogate decision. This is the problem now we are talking about, which is almost most of the cases fall in this situation. Very few people have advance directive. Very few people assign a surrogate, which is legally binding. Most of the cases are when they are at need for intubation, we don't find advance directive, and we look into a family member or a group of family members to decide for the patient. Now, what are the controversies that arise from the surrogate decision? The proper procedures for determining whether the patient is competent to decide. Before looking into the surrogate, we need to decide first that the patient is incompetent. Now, the question arises, what are the proper procedures for determining whether the patient is incompetent to decide? What is needed is a patient who is capable to understand relevant information about the treatment alternatives and to apply his values to one of these alternatives. If he can, and remember, we talked about the elements or standards of competence. Now, what we need, a patient who understands relevant information about the alternative and apply his values to one. When and to what extent the decision of family member should be given weight. So these are the controversies around the surrogate decision. The first is the proper procedures to be used to determine whether the person is competent or not. And the second, when and to what extent the decision of the surrogate need to be given weight. Again, in what cases and to what extent it is desirable or even required to involve others with family medicine, with family decision. Hospital ethical committee, the court to review the decision, when, and so these are the controversies. Controversies means we need judgment about these things that arise. What are the procedures to be taken to determine the patient is competent or not? Now, what is the level of competency required by the patient to decide? And we talked about in the informed consent, this is a controversy. Now, how much weight should I give to the decision of the surrogate? When should I interfere? What and when? And in what cases sometimes the physician and the surrogate decide on something that we need again to take the opinion of people, other people in to help us in the decision, like the hospital ethical committee. دائما في المستشفى في لجنة الأخلاقيات في المهنة. هل هذا القرار اللي اتخذه السروقت أخلاقي ولا مش أخلاقي؟ الطبيب واختلف مع السروقت، وبالتالي الهوسبيتال ethical committee can be called upon to give her opinion. أو sometimes حتى إنك تروح على الكورت، وكثير في قضايا بتصل المحاكم مشان to review the decision whether it is for the benefit of the patient or in conflict with the benefit of the patient. These are certain controversies that arise from the surrogate decision. Okay, let's stop here. Thank you. خليك سوري، لا كنت بسكر التليفون المشغول. الله يعافيك. هلا تفضل. اها اه 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 انت بتقول في مجال انهم يعملون العمليه، ما هو اقتراح. طيب ما دام هيك خلينا احكي لك القصه، لانه آه، اولا اذا ملتهب لا ينصح باجراء العمليه، وبالتالي تسريع باجراء العمليه بتكون انت مش شايف، وبالتالي لازم يعالجوها اول لغايه ما تهدى، وبعدين بعد ما تطيب وكل شيء خلص بحددوا لها يوم تيجي وهي عافيه ما فيهاش ولا شيء، مش لا 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 ما لا ينصح بالعاده اذا كان في ظروف اخرى تحكم وفوتوا وبشيلوا الهلاليه بالدهله بس، ان شاء الله ما تكونش هاي قراريه، ان شاء الله ما يضطروش يفتحوا وهي ملتهبه. كان البحث المرارة معروف، بس هسه خلينا نحكي مع تعرف الجراحة هناك باطنة ولا جراحة؟ جراحة. يا ريت لما احكي مع الدكتور خلينا نشوف الدكتور باطنة ولا جراحة احكي معه.